Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Internet Dads with your Internet Dads, Spencer and Rory. Rory, straight in off the bat, we're going to talk about something. Because I think if we're going to learn anything from this pod long term, the journey of this pod is going to be, first, is twofold. It's one, me planting little things in your brain, which take a while to come to fruition, but eventually will. And I think we've got evidence for that later on in the pod. The second thing is essentially a mechanism for proving all the things you say are true aren't true, which is many. And the first one is this belief that you're never late. Because let me tell you guys, it's 31 minutes past meet time that Rory strolled in here. So you got a case to make?
Firstly, what I would like to do is apologise to everybody involved.
Thank you.
What's less important? So my apology is the important thing. What's less important is the reason why. Like, if you're late, you're late. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter how far you've travelled. If you're late, you're late. You can live around a corner, or you could live 1,000 miles away. If the time is 2 o'clock and you're not there, that's a problem.
But
so I take full ownership, and I apologise to you. I extend nothing but sincere apologies to everybody involved who's been waiting for me. That includes everybody in the room. But it was Adam McCullough's fault.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
That's true. Like, it might be totally irrelevant. It might be totally relevant, and it is on some level completely irrelevant. But it was totally Adam McCullough's fault.
Well, I'm only giving you stick. People are late. I'm late all the time. I've talked about this
I'm
myself.
never late.
Exactly. That's the reason I'm giving you stick. These sorts of nonsense comments you make.
No, but
because I know that I'm late. I tell people in advance I'm going to be late.
But I was half an hour early.
For something else?
I was half an hour early for my arrival in this building. Adam McCullough was half an hour late for his arrival, which has had ramifications on everything that I've done subsequently.
Maybe true, but you can't make these sort of sweeping comments. You've built a career. You built a career off these comments.
I can't be held accountable for everybody's actions. There are, it's a cause and effect.
Maybe so. Listen, it's very true.
But it does stress me out.
You can be made to be late.
You ever seen that film, that Michael Douglas film, Falling Down, where he basically goes wild because everybody gets on his nerves? When I'm late, that's what I become. You know, like the person going through the ticket barrier in front of me, who's like, I can't quite cope.
Because you've built this idea of yourself of someone who's never late.
No, because I am never late. Of my own, I can't control other people's.
Well, we'll leave it there. I just wanted to give you a bit of stick because we had that.
Well, mission accomplished, Spencer.
But the other thing I was saying about how we're planting seeds in your brain about things. One thing I've learned, and obviously we knew each other pretty well before this pod, but one thing I've definitely learned from this pod about you is you have this weird juxtaposition of personality going on where you have the look of a very young man, like, and I think that's helped you in your acting days. You know, I'm not saying you're not a young man, but you know what I mean.
I'm a very
like,
young man.
You certainly given up, but you also have the personality of a very old man, whereby some certain things seem to have just passed you by in terms of technological advances. I was telling you a few episodes ago about how they have driverless cars in things like San Francisco. You can get a driverless Uber or cab or whatever, and you were like, there's no way that exists, and Neil Buchanan definitely is Banksy. Well, the Banksy thing's still out for evidence, but the driverless taxis are coming to London next year. And I know this is something you feel strongly about because you've got black cabbie drivers in the family.
Yeah, I would say that, like, the cabbies in my family, if there was one profession that kind of dominates my life, it would be black taxi drivers.
And how do they feel about this?
I don't know, because I didn't know it existed until literally now.
Yeah, well, the driverless technology has been around for a while. The issue has been it's not been legal in this country, so they've not had, like, a Tesla can drive autonomously. In this country, they don't allow it to happen. Right. But in America, they drive themselves because they have that law. But that law is changing in England.
It feels very dangerous.
Well, I think we don't want to get too much into it. It's not a tech pod, but ultimately it's more about the humans that are the danger to the driverless taxis because they can do unpredictable things. But I'm not saying we're done for or against it, but what I think is interesting is the enemy of the black cabbie has long been the Uber driver.
Yeah, yeah.
Now there's more in common between the Uber driver and the black cabbie.
There is something terrifying, you know, for our children who are going to grow up into a society that is completely unpredictable. Yeah. Because professions that we would have seen as being like totally stable industries, and perhaps we would have counselled our kids to choose a vocation in those stable industries, are not going to be anymore. No. There is going to be an entire shift around what would be seen as being a good, stable career choice that is now no longer going to be a good, stable career choice. Like when, you know the TV industry that I used to work in. Yeah. So my wife is still working in TV. The TV industry, linear telly I'm talking about here, so Channel 4, ITV, BBC to a degree, it has been totally decimated by modern tech. Totally decimated.
And I know really people like us, YouTubers.
That's what I mean. Kind of YouTube being part of that modern tech that has decimated the industry. Like Victoria, my wife, is very lucky. She works as often as as she likes, touch wood. You know, she seems to do okay. But I know really, really good, talented people that are now completely out of work in that industry that they chose.
I think this is a generational thing. Every generation has its, going back to the Industrial Revolution of hundreds of years ago, where suddenly jobs started, machines started taking jobs.
When we were kids,
I think what's scary, and maybe every generation has these fears, but I think what's scary about today is that not only the rate of change, the pace of change, how quickly these technologies are coming along, particularly AI.
And the stuff that we used to think was impossible. So certain things, you'd always need a taxi driver. That was one of those things. You go, okay, there's an evolution of certain industry, but someone's going to have to drive the car would have been a stable. Yeah. Whereas now, you would never counsel somebody younger than us, to do the knowledge.
No.
It would be the worst career choice.
I can remember really clearly sitting with Alex's parents, it would have been over a decade ago now, really trying to explain the concept of Uber to them, and they just couldn't get it. Obviously, they know what it is now. Imagine when Uber was very new. And I'm like, no, you just go on your phone and then the car comes. And they're like, what do you mean? You have to ring it. Like, no. And then that was only 10 years ago. Now everyone knows what Uber is. And now we're talking about almost that middleman being taken out. But I think what's so scary is not just that rate of change, but how do you predict the future? Like, how do you say what's going to happen in 10 years? I don't know.
It's impossible. It's very funny to hear you say that when you were trying to explain the concept of Uber to Alex's parents. There are some things I imagine that you actually suffer the same sort of hardship with me trying to explain something to me. When the brain just doesn't compute. When I try and explain to my dad what I do for a living, it's just like, he just doesn't get it. He kind of gets the radio. He's on a radio.
Catch on that radio.
He's in a pub. He's on a radio, the boy. Right? He kind of gets that. But anything beyond that, he just doesn't get. He kind of thinks I work for YouTube a little bit.
He knows what YouTube is.
Yeah, he gets it. He gets that it's a place where you put videos. But trying to explain to him, like if you were, and your career would be even more complex. To try and explain to somebody of that generation what you do for a living, it's almost worth going, mate, I'm a brickie.
I don't think it's a generational thing per se. I think it's definitely the generation above us. It's like 50-50 as to
my parents. I'm not in that generation, and I don't.
My parents are very good on their phones and stuff. Like,
are they?
Actually, for all intents and purposes, way ahead of you, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because what we were talking about last week. So Rory mentioned about him losing his phone. Did you know that every time Rory needs a new Apple product, he goes to the store?
Everybody's picking me up on this.
Right, so he didn't know, and this was off air, this conversation last week. I was explaining to him, like, as a company, we've probably purchased 20 items over the last decade, maybe more than that, in terms of laptops and things, phones. I've never been to the store. As in, I've walked past one, like, not deliberately, but when I've been in a shopping centre. In terms of purchasing one, I've never purchased anything from an Apple store. I get it all online, it comes to my house. And he was just like, what? So you just order it, it comes to your house? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's been around for like 10 plus years.
No, I go to Regent Street, but part of the reason that I go to Regent Street was because I go to the fellow who, rather ironically and slightly conceitedly, calls himself a genius. I go to see him and I go, mate, I need all of the gear off that phone onto that phone. But I didn't realise that it's actually something that you can do yourself.
Yeah, it's obviously designed to be sometimes it's tricky, but self-explanatory, where it does a lot of it for you. So obviously the technology comes a long way, but it does seem like you seem to have... how you have, like, what do they call it? Echo chambers.
Yeah.
Where you get all your political views kind of reinforced online. You seem to have created this sort of like, what's the word? Like black hole of information where it just doesn't come across to you. I don't know how you do it.
Do you know what it is though? It's almost like a choice. I just hate the tech.
Yeah.
And I think having kids reinforces it a bit.
Yeah.
Like the fear of tech. Like, I don't like it. When people talk about having kids these days and they try and suggest that it's the hardest time to have ever had kids.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. Like, we're not watching our children die of cholera. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not dealing with those hardships. But a hardship that we are dealing with is like screen time. The modern world of accessibility to anybody in the world. Like, I remember being like completely baffled when I went round my mate's house. My mate had a kid quite young. So his kid was like playing computer games against someone in America. I was like, who? I don't know. It's like, well, who is it? Who are you playing with? Is it your mate? Like, my brain struggled to kind of understand that until I was told that that's very normal.
Yeah.
But I do find that the pitfalls of society now all kind of comes from tech. And in a fantasy world, I would turn my back on it all.
Yeah.
Like, that would be, it's kind of, people think about their fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, I would, if I had loads of money, I would buy a ski lodge in Aspen.
Yeah.
If I had loads of money, I would delete all of this crap.
You're not on your own, mate. I actually think, correct me if I'm wrong, people watching, listening, whatever, I think a lot of this is a kind of a lie that we tell ourselves, if I'm honest, because if you dig deeper on this with most people, you'll soon realise it's not going to happen. But I at least think on the surface, the majority of people have this fantasy about giving up their tech, and most of them have convinced themselves they can't. Some of which will be true, like their career or whatever. But you can do it.
There are lies that we tell ourselves as well. There are certain lies that we tell ourselves that we think are true.
Yeah.
Like, do you know when I really noticed it? When I moved out of London, I was like, I have to live in London. Of course I have to live in London. It'd be impossible for me not to. But being a Londoner is part of who I am. It's part of my identity. It's the way I see myself. Being a Londoner, being a Chelsea fan, it's kind of in my makeup. And the amount of lies that I told myself about needing to be in London and needing to live in, none of it was true. But I believed it to be true until I actually took the leap and moved out.
I think that's the world in general. I think most of us operate with this element of delusion about the rules of the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what's actually happening. The best example of that is like safety. Like we all think that we're all safe all the time because the government will protect us, the police will protect us. The reality is actually we're not safe at all. Anyone could break into your house tonight, probably, and my house.
And it's Starmer's Britain, it probably will happen.
And once they get in, it is very quickly like a martial law situation, survival of the fittest. The reality of what the police, and this isn't me digging out the police, I'm just talking about, you start thinking about these things when you have kids and stuff, is they don't actually protect you in advance of anything happening. They then implement some sort of law after something happens. So it's a lot. We all have these illusions or delusions of the setups around us. But the tech thing, I think, so it's actually quite a good case in point. I just got back from a little mini festival.
I saw a glorious picture of you and your boy.
Yeah, so we went for my brother-in-law's 40th. We had like a sort of off-grid festival, 60 plus people. It was amazing, to be honest. There's very little tech involved, very little phone signal. So like all that sort of thing was great. And just very positive, like-minded individuals, loads of kids. There's loads of cool things going on, loads of football, like a big water slide, big bonfire, and all the things. Lots of great food, everyone eating around the campfire and stuff. And it is ag, like especially on the way there and on the way back. But while we were there, it was great. Like, we went via camping shop. We have a tent, but it was only like a little pop-up.
Oh no,
one.
You stayed in a tent?
Yeah, we did. We stayed in a tent.
Oh no!
Full disclosure, we did get an Airbnb down the road, because we weren't sure what it was going to be like, we weren't sure what the weather was going to be like, and we had 2 young kids and we needed, opportunity.
Did you sleep in the tent?
Yeah, we did for 2 nights, yeah. He had all the facilities, showers and stuff, all this thing, but we went to a camping shop on the way there. I had to buy a tent because our other tent was too small, and get a few bits, and it can become quite an expensive enterprise after a while, but we got some good little bits and then had a great time, really good time, and the kids took to it really well.
How did you find staying in a tent? That's my worst ever nightmare.
Really? Why?
Yeah, literally the worst thing you could ever ask me to do.
Why?
Sleep in a tent.
Why?
For every possible reason that goes with sleeping in a tent.
What are you worried about? The heat, the comfort,
My idea of a holiday is going somewhere better than my house, not somewhere worse than my house. The idea of being in a tent, and I'm terrified that Clementine is going to want to do it, because we actually had like her school thing this week and people were camping, like they'd make it an event.
Yeah.
And our year group aren't allowed to do that yet. But when we come to being old enough, I'm already now having like minor anxiety that in 4 years.
But why? What can't you do for the night?
Sleep in a tent, everything about it, the hygiene, the
hygiene?
privacy.
What do you think happens? You walk in there and it's just like...
They don't have toilets, do they?
They've got, what, camping sites?
No.
Of course they do.
Yeah. The site...
So you got first of all, you can have a tree wee, mate. Plenty of people have tree wees,
No, what do they call it? Bush wee.
Yeah, well, me and my little boy, we call it a tree wee.
Bluey.
But in terms of so when Alex and I drove around Europe pre-kids, we had a camper van and we stayed at camping sites and they have showers and they have.
Wait, but talk me through the showers. See, this is again troublesome.
Why though?
What kind of water pressure?
Did you know? It's funny you say that. Today, the best water pressure I've ever experienced in my life was at Lake Bled in Slovenia in a campsite.
What sort of temperature?
The pressure was elite.
What about the temperature?
I mean, you can get ones with really good hot showers. You get some that are less hot, but you don't really care about that sort of thing.
Who doesn't?
Once you remove the luxuries of this facade,
that's where
you're in the campsite and you're like, actually, I want a cold shower. Let's get myself up and at them, and we'll get in the sea. You love jumping in the sea. That's not.
I love going in the sea, but I love luxury.
But you can't give it up for 1 day, 2 days.
Never. Not if I mean, I can. I often do. but I don't want to. And the idea of doing it on holiday, the idea of doing it by choice, no.
You don't have to do it instead of a holiday. It's just part of a maybe not a yearly thing for you. Sounds like maybe more once a decade for you, maybe. But like,
if my daughter, the oldest daughter, decides to say to me, which I fear will happen, that she wants to do it, of course I will do it. I will do it for her, but I will do it with a heavy heart, and I will treat myself really well afterwards.
It would have been amazing to see you in this vibe we were in the weekend, because it was so far removed from what I mean. Okay, I'm not saying it was 100% on the health and safety side of things, but like, my little 4-year-old was shooting a bow and arrow. Like, it was only a plastic.
So it's like Centre Park.
He couldn't have hurt anyone. Yeah, but I'm talking like the stuff that you're just not going to get if you take him to, your kids club in a hotel.
Yeah.
He was being exposed. All these kids, all different ages. There was a great one. One of the parents was driving around a quad bike and had a little trailer in the back and had like 12 kids in there. Again, not health and safety.
Yeah, they were loving that. Yeah.
But it was just, I was watching his face, and I got some pictures of him, and he just looked.
No, they love that.
So happy.
No, do you know what, Clement? Because Victoria's from the North East, like she's the most sort of London woman now. But because she grew up on a farm in the North East, obviously the grandparents live on a farm. So Clementine gets exposed to obviously she goes on a quad bike. She absolutely loves it. But I never go anywhere near it.
Yeah.
I like the animals, but from afar.
From inside the window.
Hello there.
Hello there, animal.
Hello there,
How
cow.
are you?
Yeah. I do love farm life.
Been down the Kilburn Road recently, Mr. Cow?
I'm going to Diddley Squat.
Oh, are you?
Yeah,
Chipping Norton.
Love it. Like I love rural Britain.
That is you in a nutshell. Some people go to farms. You watch Clarkson's farm on TV from the inside.
Do you know what? When I go to the farm, obviously Victoria grew up on one. When I'm there, I get the dog and I go for a run. I get covered in mud and it's freezing, and I get back and I'm like head to toe in mud, having been for a run through the grounds, effectively, like on a pathway. But then I thoroughly enjoy having a shower and sitting in front of the fire, and probably then going on Twitter.
Could be a nice middle ground for you. You get these retreats or these like
Soho Farm.
Yeah, or maybe well, just maybe slightly a little bit less elite than that, but you get these, they're not tents, but they're like these almost little mini rooms, and you have a bath in there and stuff. And
I'd do it with Clementine, but I would never ever do it by choice.
Interesting.
Ever.
Well, so I say to Alex all the time as well, like I probably, if you said to me, we've got 3-4 days of a weekend in the middle of the summer, what would your preference be? I probably wouldn't have said let's go camping, but I had a really good time. While I was there, I thought it was amazing, and I was so impressed by the setup. But mostly I would say the best thing about it was not so much my youngest, obviously he's only one, but with my oldest, just watching the joy on his face. He just absolutely loved it, and he was constantly looking for something to do, no mention of wanting to watch TV and all these sorts of things. And you realise how much of these things we're worried about, TV or screen time or whatever, are less like almost an addiction of our children, and it's more like they want something to do. They want something to do.
That we put them
and
in,
sometimes, then again, maybe it's a weather thing in this country. Obviously, the weather's been amazing recently, but generally, when there's less to do outside, they're gonna say, "Can I watch TV?" But if you've got, here's one activity you can do, another one, constant, entertainment, then they will more often than not go down that route.
Yeah. Also, in the community that it sounds like this event had, and obviously we've got a tiny version of that where we live. That really helps. Like, that whole thing about it takes a village to bring up a kid.
Yeah.
It's really true, isn't it? When you have that kind of co-parenting thing. Because I got left on my own on Sunday. Victoria went to a spa, can you believe? So I had 2 kids all day Sunday. And do you know what we did? We never went home. It was actually amazing. It was so easy in the end because I was just out all day Sunday. I've got this thing every Sunday morning. I meet the other dads, meet for a Gales, to the park after the Gales. It's become like my anchor of the week. I look forward to it so much. And rather than then going home, which would have been like really stressful, we then went to a mate's house who had like a lot of people over in the garden.
All the kids there.
All the kids.
Nice.
And that way I'm obviously focused on Pandora, but Clementine is just kind of running free. And yeah, it's a great way to do it. It's be out, go out rather than
I try and do the same. I don't necessarily do it with both kids very often, to be fair, but when I will as they get older for sure. But with my oldest, if I've got a day with them, I don't really want to sit in that.
No.
Go and do something.
Just get to Legoland.
The time goes quite quickly. Well, even if it's just quite a basic thing, we'll go for the other day. We went for we call like a little coffee shop date on the high street. We'll have some food, have
Baby
a little
Chino.
chat. took him down to a sports shop, bought a cricket set because I wanted to teach him cricket, started playing in the garden.
Love it.
He might take him to take the dog out for a walk. Like suddenly, half the day's gone already.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if you ever do go down the camping route and how you find it, because it is ag, like setting the tent up, taking the tent down. That's probably the worst bit. But the actual,
I just know that I wouldn't be able to put it up.
You can get these inflatable ones now. Mine isn't, but you just literally, it just blows up. Almost like a bouncy castle, and you take it down. Okay. So lot less ag, but they're more expensive.
Yeah, I'd get that.
Yeah, you probably would prefer
that because I can't be like banging tent poles into floors.
It's not that bad once you've set it up. The main problem is like all these things is once you set them, pack them down, you never get them back in the bag.
I'd never go again, so I'd just leave it.
Yeah, I had to say that at one point. Should we just leave?
Just leave it. I'll buy a new tent if I ever need it. If I ever need a tent again in a decade, I'll buy a new tent.
We'll hopefully use that tent again. But it will just sit now in our garage, much bigger than the bag it came in.
Yeah.
And just hopefully it does get used again. But no, I mean, my brother also camped out with his kids this weekend. They had a school thing, but I think it was cancelled for some reason. So they just did it in their garden. And it is fun. Me and my boy have camped in the garden quite a few times.
Have you?
When it gets really, you know how when it gets like recently, it's been really hot.
Yeah.
And obviously we haven't got aircon or anything in the house. So we've got fans out, all these things. Sometimes it's so hot, I just want to sleep in the garden.
It's painful, the heat. It's so bad at the moment.
That's where a tent can be quite handy. Just sleep in the garden.
I'm sleeping in my garden.
You get these pop-up ones. The pop-up one I've got, not the one we used this weekend, it was literally like 50 quid, and you literally go like that, like a Pokeball. It just goes, boom, the tent is now up. And then you just throw a little mattress or a little like decking chair mattress in there. Still two-manner. Me and the lad slept in there probably 4 or 5 times. It's a great night out.
I've just noticed that you're wearing flip-flops.
Yes.
I'm sorry that that's steering it in a different direction. But
is that a problem?
Minorly, if I'm honest.
This is a similar look, lower body, to what we had in our Monte Carlo Getaway podcast. Dad's on tour.
What are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing?
What are you doing?
The sun's out, mate. Have you not noticed?
No, I've noticed that the sun is out, but why are you not dressed?
Shoes, socks. What's the problem?
Oh, shoes.
They are a shoe. A flip-flop is
a
a slider, actually, rather than a flip-flop, let me tell you. And women have been going around with no socks on and shoes on for years, saying I can't do the same with socks on.
I'm saying that, actually, yes.
Okay, well, we agree to disagree on that one.
So you're just walking around London's fashionable East End in showering apparel?
Yes. I mean, men have been turning up to football games like this for years.
Why turning up? What? No, what? Not on the coach. I wouldn't get off a coach.
Yeah.
Would they?
Yeah. All the boys have been doing this for years.
Do they really?
Yeah, all the time.
It's a shame.
In fact, these sliders are a remnant. Look at the state of them from when I played for Hashtag. Actually, when I was playing for them 7-8 years ago, I've had them all this whole time.
Oh, what, you just turn up for a match in those?
Yeah, and then you stick your boots on, stick them back on afterwards. How is that not convenient?
It's a sad state of society that's now an acceptable look.
Well, you know what? Maybe it's not acceptable, but these guys got here on time.
Touche, sir. Touche.
Right, we've got loads of Dad Diaries to get through, including actually. Well, we've got a voice note. We're going to play, which is linked to the Joe Weller episode we had a while ago, but someone sent a voice note in. But before we get into that, you received an amazing
moment. Do you know the people who watch this podcast? They're so kind. Like the people that get in touch via this are so nice.
Yeah.
And I had an amazing moment. I got back to my car. Where's my phone? I can read you the letter. I got back to my car after a long day's work, and to be totally honest, I was heartbroken because I thought I had a parking ticket, which I get all the time. Do you know I almost use parking tickets as like a luxury? I'm allowed one. I kind of allow.
You're deliberately.
No, not deliberately.
Break the law.
I end up getting a lot of parking ticket, like more than I should. And I thought, I've got another parking ticket, and I didn't even anticipate it because I felt like I parked legally.
Right.
When I get to the car, it wasn't a parking ticket. It was a chocolate.
Ooh.
Which was one of my favourite chocolates.
Was it melted?
Can't go wrong. It wasn't. No, it was perfect condition, and there was a note written on Premier League paper from a chap called Tom, and it says, "Hi Rory, I just missed you. Looking like you were heading for the station. Looking like you were heading for the train. Love all of your stuff, especially the new Internet Dads pod. I haven't missed one, and the poker stuff. You and Spence are great together." I've met him before, actually playing against him at Beaconsfield Town.
Yep, remember that.
He played there a few years ago against you, and basically it just got a lovely note saying, and at the end of it, it does say you're welcome to mention this on your podcast. So It's from Dan. It says, don't forget to hashtag it.
His name was Tom a minute ago.
Tom, sorry. Thanks, Tom. P.S. It says don't, but
Okay.
It says don't. It looks like Dan. Don't forget to hashtag it. Then it says come on you Irons.
Oh, good lad. It's a West Ham fan.
West Ham fan.
So it sounds like more of a fan of mine than yours, if anything.
I think that's the entirety of the people that watch this podcast, to be totally honest. Well, I'm clinging on to your coattails for grim death.
To be honest, I was a little bit suspicious of Tom when he said he's a fan of everything you do. I was like, it can't be true.
No, it can't be. Even I know that. No. I'm fully aware. that this is.
Sounds like
these are your people. But he sounds like a lovely guy, and he left me a charming note on my car.
Good man.
And it wasn't a parking ticket. So thank you very much. Really do appreciate that.
It's a double win, isn't it? And also, you're right what you say about the sort of... I find this in general, when you're a certain size thing, say on YouTube or whatever, I can remember back to my early days of like doing FIFA stuff or whatever, your community is always going to be more positive because people have to go a bit more out their way to find you. They have to be a bit more of a fan. Whereas once you get a certain critical mass of attention, which maybe this podcast will never have because it's a bit more of a niche, right? And obviously the niche we're talking about, we're trying to do a positive thing. I think like last week's episode with Flav was so positive and seems to be really well received. It's good stuff we're talking about. You might not always agree, but you can see the intent behind what we're trying to do is a good one. So I think it's nice that we have that positive community. But the reality is as you grow and you do get into kind of more general population, you just do find more negativity. I see
what you mean.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. So if you're a YouTuber who speaks to 50,000 subscribers, you're right. It's going to be positive because they're the people that like you. If you get your face put on a Talk Sport clip, it's going to be negative because they're not people who have particularly come to find you. Yeah,
and even more so with Talk Sport when what they're selling, if you like, is opinion, and it's very much like they don't allow for too much grey area on TalkSport. It's either this or that. You either agree or disagree.
Yeah.
Whereas we're trying to create a conversation here, which is more, how do you see it?
Yeah.
Am I doing it right? A bit more forgiving. So, yeah, I think it's natural. But it's true. It's definitely one of the best things of this pod so far is that positivity.
In fact, if anybody is watching on YouTube, thank you for doing so. And if you haven't yet clicked subscribe, would you do that right now? We're edging ever closer to 10K, so we're hoping to get there.
Please do subscribe. Dad Diary number 1. So, my daughter is now 1 and 3 months old. 1 and 3 months old, I guess that's one person. 15 months, you could say.
Yeah.
Since her birth, I have barely been invited out by any of the lads that I'm in the friendship group with. My problem being is they never plan anything and do most things last minute. And obviously, being a parent, you can't just do things last minute. What's your opinion? This is very interesting because I just saw a very good friend of mine recently, who I won't name, but just had a child. And he was sort of saying to me, and he's got a really solid friendship group. It's kept in touch with ever since school, my age now. And he said he's really basically disappointed with how a lot of his pals have been since he had the kid. And these are pals that haven't got kids themselves. And he was like, they just don't get it. They don't seem to care that much, etc. And people that would have been super tight with him before, just there's a bit of a gap emerging. And I tried to console him and sort of say, look, I think a lot of that's natural. I think some of those guys, you can't, it's so hard when your life changes so cataclysmically when you have a child and everything you look at is different. You see everything through a different spectacle, if you like. It's very hard to then relate to that person who hasn't had that same experience. That's not them being wrong. Now, obviously, there's a certain level of interest you would expect from very good friends, and there's a certain level of care, if you like, and connection that you expect. But I do think you've also got to see it as a period of your life where you might miss out on some things, and then if you can, you get back in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't put this down to a lack of empathy or a lack of friendship or anything like that, actually. I would just put it down to ignorance. And ignorance in a positive way. They just don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody that hasn't got kids, they actually don't know. And when I think back to what I was like and the way that I saw the world before I had kids, like I remember my mate who had kids younger than everybody else, I found it bonkers that he didn't come out.
Yeah.
Like I remember we were going to Vegas. We were going to Vegas for a stag and he wasn't coming. And I was actually furious with him. I kind of said, well, people still go on holiday, mate. People still like so stupid, so dumb, so idiotic.
But at that point,
it's because I didn't know any better.
But being at your mate's stag, right? When you haven't got other priorities,
that is so important.
It's such a high. It is genuinely. It should be because you haven't got those other priorities. It should. If the boys who haven't got the kids aren't going to be there no matter what on your stag, then who is?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you've got to have that code of ethics. But once you open your eyes a little bit and you have some more life experiences and you have kids and things, it doesn't mean those things aren't still cool. It just they pale in insignificance compared to the things that really matter. So you can't expect too much from your mates. What I would say is maybe like when it's a good time for you, maybe invite them all round, maybe host something, see which ones come. They're not going to come every week. They're going to quite frankly have better things to do.
Yeah.
But try and create that connection again. And then obviously when you get to that point where maybe the kid's a bit older and you've got a bit more time and you've got a bit more balance in your life, try and get those things going. But it's, flowers don't bloom every day of the year. It's fine for friendships and things to
ebb and flow.
To just ebb and flow.
Do you know what I think is important to acknowledge as well? And you have to be totally honest with yourself here. When you haven't got children, being around children is crap. If you're honest.
It can
also,
be.
if we're totally honest, I mean, being around children when they're your children can be crap as well. Like, they don't always enhance everything. Like, do you know, I saw something happened actually. I was reading it on the way here. In France, they've totally banned adult-only holiday resorts. So every holiday resort now has to welcome children.
Right.
Now, being around other children can be a hideous experience. And I think that ban, I couldn't believe it. I thought, that's terrible that they've done that in France. Some people, maybe even parents, they just want to get away. And I think that you're in this situation, the fellow who's got the kids, your mates who don't have it, they're not being snide to you. They're not being harsh on you. They're just at a completely different stage in their life.
But what I agree with everything you just said. I think what I would say though is, within that group, I'm sure there's one or two you're super close with or more close with, and maybe just reach out to them and say, lads, what's going on? Any chance of you arranging something in advance so I can actually come to it for a change? Just express that concern, and I'm sure they will do their best to help. I think that's fine. But
good advice.
Don't worry too much, because it is part of the evolution of parenthood, I think, and you'll get it back. And they'll have kids in the future, and they'll be behind you.
They'll have kids in the future, and they'll go, "Oh, mate, we should have been about more. I'm so sorry."
Yeah, well, they'll go through their own period where they miss a bit, and it's just, you can't be all everywhere at once. Can you? You're doing something very important in the meantime. We've got a voice note to play now. This is from, I'm going to play it off my phone. So this is from someone who got in touch after hearing the Joe Weller episode. Let's have a listen.
Just watching the Joe Weller podcast, and I just was in the thing. I mean, this is a month ago now, but he says that, it's a selfless thing to have a child because you're giving everything to them and you get nothing back. But I think, I'm 21, right? But I think the most rewarding thing you can experience is raising a child to be someone who's nice and understanding of the world and selfless. Like, the best test of your knowledge is to teach what you know to someone else and see if it works out right. Just thought I'd share that.
I like that. That's from Will Jack Clark. He sent that to us on Instagram, Internet Dad's Pod. Follow if you're not already. So some of what he said there, I think we raised with Joe at the time, which was, it's not as selfless as you think. There is a two-way relationship. But what I really liked there is what he said about it being a great test of what you think you know. Does it help another human to kind of have that knowledge imparted on them? And that is a huge part of parenthood, isn't it? It's like, how much have you figured out in the time you've been around? Okay, what benefit can that be to someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very difficult, because a lot of the things that I've learned over my life, you learn them and you believe them to be true forever, but society kind of changes.
Yeah. And
then they're not true anymore. And you then, what I find very difficult is trying to teach Clementine maybe things that I believed, maybe things that I don't necessarily believe.
Yeah.
Is a better way of putting it. So do you know something that's happened in society massively since we were young, certainly when I was young. When I was young, everybody, unashamedly and proudly wanted to be rich. That's what people said. All the music that you would listen to, it was about making money. It was about earning. It was, I like garage, I still do, but I really liked garage when I was young. All the songs, so solid. It was do it, gotta make money today. Do it, gotta make money today. Right, it was all that, right? Everything was about making money. That was how society rolled. That was what everybody was trying to do. I think that society has changed an awful lot now, where that attitude, at least expressed openly, is frowned upon. It doesn't seem to be something that's celebrated. It seemed to be something to sneer at. So, when I'm, obviously Clementine's incredibly young for this conversation, but, I kind of go, it's very important that you work hard at school. And if she kind of questions it as to why, the answer that I was taught was, well, you want a good job when you're older. Whereas Victoria wouldn't really want me to be saying that.
No, should it be more about you want to be happy?
You want to be happy. You want exactly
at peace with yourself. But I think even what you said there, whilst I'm not questioning it, that's part of your own individual experience, right? It might be that the people that you were around and the people that the music or whatever the things you were exposed to was very much about make money. It doesn't mean everyone was like that at that time, but you take what your environment
was true for me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my point is you can have had a 30, 40, 50, however old you are, years of experience and have learned certain things. You say, I want to impart this knowledge onto my child, but how much of that is specific to your experience? And if that child, and they rarely are living the exact same life as the parent, how relevant is it for some of them? Sometimes I think being a good parent is discerning the difference between the knowledge you want to pass on and the stuff you don't want to pass on.
Oh, 100%.
The stuff that you don't, that works for you, but actually all you're doing by teaching that to your child is creating maybe a complex or a fear or a reaction they don't actually need because they're in a different environment.
Yeah, I do completely agree with that. But where I would potentially disagree with you is I would say that attitude to making money 20 years ago, I think that was across society.
Definitely think you're right. It was more so than it is now.
I'm just thinking of everything that I like. So everybody that I liked individually would all have songs about that. So what? Wiley, Real Money Getter. Me and my crew were hot, can't get better. Everything I do is for the love of the cheddar. And it was always everything was about that.
But
whereas
that
wasn't exclusive to me.
But a lot of the stuff you're talking about there is from a certain genre of music, I would say, and like hip hop or whatever you want to call it.
Garage hip hop.
It's always been about that mobility, and often it's because of the social, economic factors of the people making that music, and the fact they're trying to get out from somewhere to somewhere else. And that's a generalization. Of course, there's exceptions to that. But like for example, the indie scene wasn't the same. Like, I was listening to Killers and Blur and all these guys, and their music wasn't all about.
No, you're right.
Money. A lot of that was about doing drugs and going, and partying and being rock stars. So it's very much about the world you're in, I think. But I do agree though that there was a movement in society. I guess it started in like the baby boomer generation after the post-war, and it became about just improving your situation in life economically. And as more people did that, the infatuation went from being financial to like happiness and about actually fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is like a natural evolution of society. But
I think what you said there after that was also very accurate. What you don't want them to be like. So foibles of your own, perhaps.
You might have developed
if you've got anxiety, if you've got particular views, if you've got whatever, not necessarily allowing your offspring to inherit the things that you don't necessarily like about yourself.
Yeah, I've got a pal who's maybe a bit more of a worrier than he needs to be. Whenever we dig into that and talk about that, he says it's his dad. His dad just told him to basically worry about everything.
Really?
And he just told him how much of a danger this could be, that could be. And obviously that's come from a place of care and wanting to protect his child, but actually he's made his child scared of things he doesn't need to be scared of.
Yeah, I've got that.
Yeah.
I've got a real
survival instinct, isn't it?
I've got that, I think, where what I do, I think they call it, people far more intelligent than me will call it catastrophizing.
Right.
So what you do is a small problem happens, and what you do is go, the end result of this is going to be that.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, and it almost definitely won't be. Like what you do is you go, the worst possible thing that can happen now is this, and then you actually make that the reality.
Yeah, and then sometimes thinking about those things is what guarantees it to happen.
Yeah.
It's really trivial comparison, but I literally said the same thing to Alex about that tent. We were packing the tent down, and I said to Al, you know this will never go back in that bag now. And she was like, it will. When we get home, we'll make it. I said, no, I'm telling you, there is no way, based on just our previous life experience, that we are going to sit down of our own accord at home and repack this whole tent to get in that bag. It will never go in that bag. But because I'm so sure of that is ensuring that it will never go back in the bag. Whereas if I was like, no, we'll go back in the bag. Then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, you've actually, without knowing it, you've actually been very good for me on this front. You actually did me quite a big favour, because I do think about your advice quite a lot on this. You said something to me a while ago. You tell me if you remember this. One of my anxieties, I guess, is because I now have 2 kids. I worry about not working. I worry about not having work. It's something that terrifies me. I've been out of work before. I know how hard it can be. And if the work were to dry up, I don't know what I would do. And that's an anxiety that I have. And some people might say, well, it's not a legitimate fear. You do, the work is there. So worry about that if it becomes a problem. But I worry. And you actually said to me, you were like, well, you've got to back yourself. You've got yourself into this position. If that stops, you'd find something else, and you would be able to find yourself a foothold in something else and just back yourself to do that. And it was quite a wise thing for you to say to me, because whilst I don't necessarily agree that I could do that, because I feel like I've been very lucky, it's unlikely that luck would befall me again. it done me a bit of a favour because you're like, okay, well, even if you didn't want to do this podcast with me anymore, I'll find another podcast. Even if Adam McCullough decides to not do the club with me anymore, I'll find another, and I just think occasionally, right, just back yourself. And even if the worst did happen, which is me catastrophizing it, through your advice, I was like, well, just find a way out of it anyway.
Yeah, what I try and do is I try and understand what the worst case scenario is, make peace with that happening, i.e. if that happens, what's my plan, but then ensure it never does. And it never does. And okay, I'm speaking from a position of privilege, and I know some people do have the worst case scenario thing happen to them, and I completely understand that, but the reality is most people don't. If you properly do that exercise and really think about the worst case scenario, the worst case scenario, because me and you, worst case scenario is probably the same thing, and it's probably something happened to our kids. That's actually the worst case scenario, right? So suddenly your next worst case scenario is losing your job. Oh, as long as my kids are all right.
Yeah.
And then you keep doing that, and eventually probably statistically that never comes. And actually, what you do is you make peace with that, and then you put all your energy and effort into the best case happening.
Yeah.
And statistically, something in the middle is going to happen.
Occasionally, this doesn't happen often. Occasionally, you're very wise.
Well, maybe I'm actually always wise, and you're just not picking up on the other things.
No, because other times you're wearing bloody stupid flip flops on the tube, which is.
I mean,
totally
if Gandhi was here, he wouldn't be wearing much smarter than me. Would you say he was unwise? I'm not saying I'm Gandhi yet.
Yeah. I like what you did there. You drew a parallel between you and Gandhi.
I just did watch the film.
Ben Kingsley.
Actually, it wasn't Gandhi. It was Baby Buddha with Keanu Reeves, which nowadays would never be made because it has Keanu Reeves playing Buddha.
Yeah.
As in, they changed the colour of his skin. It's very controversial. But it's pretty deep film, actually. It's pretty decent stuff.
Really?
If you're into that
I've seen Ben Kingsley as Gandhi.
Yes, Ben Kingsley plays Gandhi. But Ben Kingsley does have Asian family heritage.
Does he?
It does have some. They still did, use makeup to make it, which is obviously
I find
cool.
that thing a little bit wild. Actors are different. When actors change race, I kind of get it. It's a bit weird. But actors who, when people go, well, the part is gay, and therefore the actor has to be gay. Well, I think that's mental.
I am interested in your take on this. Obviously,
Danny Boyle spoke recently.
You were taught. You were educated in the craft of acting, and I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble here or anything, but the point of acting is being something you're not. And so why are we? There's two things at play here, right? There's a problem with representation and a problem with opportunity, and that's not an acting problem. That's a world problem. And then there's an acting, how good is someone for the role situation, right? Yeah. But then what's happening now is you're conflating all these issues, and now we're getting characters changed. Their actual character and how the creator of those characters, the envision of those characters to be, is being changed in order to fit certain agendas. And I'm not saying, I don't think it's one was always right, one is always wrong situation, but it's like
wild. Like Daniel Day-Lewis wouldn't have been able to do My Left Foot now because he doesn't actually walk with a limp.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could go that way, couldn't it? It could go that way, yeah.
I think it's ridiculous. The best actor for the role, if the role is a gay guy, doesn't necessarily mean that the best person to portray that role is gay.
No, I think the problem that some people will say in answer to that is that not enough gay guys are getting straight roles as well. Perfect world, if we were to create society from scratch now, then the best person would get the role and they'd be the best actor and they'd portray that character the best, right? I think everyone can get behind that. But I think what's happening is we're not coming from a place of equal opportunity. So we're trying to fast track a better world. And sometimes to do that, it comes back to positive discrimination in the days of the civil rights movement and stuff in America. It's is that in itself a good thing? No, maybe not. But if it's to fix a worse problem, maybe it is.
No, but I get things, things like the Rooney Rule and things like that. Yeah. I get that. And I actually think it's a good idea. But when you sometimes there is a problem with representation, but there isn't an issue with homosexuality in acting. We don't need to solve the problem of can you be homosexual?
I don't think it's a homosexuality issue. I think this is an issue of just general everything at the moment. Characters are being changed and things are being. But again, it's to fix a societal issue. I personally think we are in a sort of period of adjustment. Generally, without going too deep into this stuff, but a lot of the political agendas at the moment, we're probably in all the right reasons trying to correct issues in society, and we're at a point of correction where we might have gone a bit too far, but we need to do that in order to then find the middle ground.
But I heard that Danny Boyle, who did the London Games. Yeah. He said that he wouldn't do Slumdog Millionaire. He said he wouldn't do it. I think, why don't
yeah.
you give all the money back then that you earned from Slumdog Millionaire? Or is he a Londoner? I don't know where he's from. Should he have done the London? He should have done the London Games then. I should have done it.
I will say this: Danny Boyle was a man of principle. I respect. You know, he turned down a knighthood.
Okay, but he's not that principled. Give all of your money to.
No, he's not saying that it was wrong to do it then. He's saying that he couldn't do it now. Time has changed.
Yes, so correct the wrong and give all of the money that you've made from that decision.
I don't think you have to. I don't think that's a fair argument.
Should he have done Train Spotting? Is he Scottish?
No, he's saying that what he did. I read the quote a little bit with Slumdog Millionaire quote. He basically said that they even tried that back then, which is what, probably almost 20 years ago. That film now. Even then, he was always someone that was fairly alert to this sort of thing. They took a skeleton crew and they did use local talent. They did use local Indian film crew, but ultimately the big decision makers were still white people that were creating a story about an Indian story from a white perspective. Yeah, they had some consultants and whatnot. And he's basically saying now it would probably be better story if told and led by people of that. He could still be involved. He's not saying he wouldn't be involved in the film. He's saying that he would have used other people higher up the food chain. That's what he's ultimately saying. And I think he's probably right, but it doesn't mean it was wrong. It's like, this is the thing, like we're cancelling shows that at the time were fine because they don't work in today's world, but there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
If you go, how far do you go back? Like, you know, there's loads of things.
I mean,
the royal family is built off like just murder and killing people. So are we going to cancel them?
Fools and that's.
I think
when you're talking about TV shows, I thought you meant the royal family, as in like.
No. Yeah, they
like
the stuff they used to get up to make that show. No, but like, there's a lot of institutions in the world right now that are built off murder and
but
terrible.
Do you not think it's just ridiculous? Like, Only Fools and Horses is now seen as being an offensive show.
Well, I think there's episodes and there's quotes and there's things in that show which do not stand the test of time, and they take the rest. They maybe affect the rest of the show as a result. Whereas if you take those episodes away, it allows it to live a little bit longer. But some things just have their place in time. Like, we grew up a massive Only Fools and Horses family. My nan loved it, so we watched around our house. We went to see the musical, like all that thing. It was an amazing show. But I am also aware there are comments and things made in that which are not appropriate today.
No, they're not being made today, though.
No, but then you do have we have lived through that period and understood, and we've probably been on our own journey in that time. When you have a younger person that can still go on television and watch that show and hear certain phrases, is that a good thing? Do they need that show?
Yeah.
Can that show not just be for us?
I think society will tell you that your perspective here is correct. And most people, I'm sure, listening to this will agree with you. I just think it's crazy to judge everything by today's standards that happened. Like, Only Fools and Horses is a really funny show that is set in 1980s, 1990s London, and is reflective of that time. You can learn about what life was like in London, and therefore the UK in the 80s and 90s by watching that show.
I don't hate the middle ground we've got right now, if I'm honest. Right, it's still being shown on TV. They're not showing some episodes for sure. You can still own it and watch it in your house. It's not a crime to watch the show or anything. Like, that would be crazy. But what they're doing is maybe just not promoting it in the same way. They're not continuing to make it. They're not exacerbating it, and they're letting it live in its place. They are censoring it. They have censored it a little bit, yeah. But you can still access the uncensored things. You know, when you watch Jungle Book now on Disney, there's a message that comes up at the start and says, you know,
what, the original,
the cartoon? Yeah, this is made with, you know, antiquated stereotypes. You know, it's ultimately a film that was made off the back of a book which is hundreds of years old, which is colonialism, a lot of things inherent in the writing of that story. Doesn't mean it's not one of my favourite cartoons. I love that cartoon.
It's about a fucking bear that sings a song. Like, nobody's looking at that going, this is a reflection of society. The bear is literally walking about singing a song.
It's not about the bear, it's about Baloo. A boy. And Baloo, yeah. But the bit they're referring to is the reference and the portrayal of the Indian people on the edge of the village where Mowgli ends up going.
I can't even remember that, because all I really know about is the terrifying Shere Khan and the bear scratching his
Tiger
back
King.
on the.
That's what that means, Tiger King. Yeah,
Shere Khan.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, so my little boy's watched Jungle Book. He's got the same Baloo bear I had when I was younger. I passed it on to him. I used to love that film. Still love that film. Some great songs in it.
He used to be my scoutmaster.
Who, Baloo?
Did you ever do scouts?
No.
They all had a name from the jungle.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Nice.
Ninth Marylebone.
Well, I can tell you a lot of trivia about that era of Disney if you wanted, but that's another podcast perhaps. But I think that...
Tell me one more thing about it.
Okay, so Phil Harris, who plays Baloo, also plays Little John in Robin Hood.
Oh, when Little John, when Robin Hood is a fox?
Yeah, Robin
I love
Hood's
that one. Oodle Alley.
And so Robin Hood's a fox. Little John's a bear, exact same voice as Baloo. They also use some of the same animation.
Robin Hood, Little John running through the forest.
So Winnie Pooh. I said that's Phil Harris who sings.
Love that.
But then Winnie the Pooh and Mowgli, they use a lot of the same animation. Literally, they basically used to take the whole animation shot. Oh, this is Mowgli walking through the jungle, and they just use it again in 100 Acre Wood of Winnie the Pooh running through. They wouldn't redesign it; they just replaced the characters, saves time. And the guy does the voice of Car the snake, also is the voice of Winnie the Pooh, and Louis Prima, who is the singer who does King Louis. That's why, that's why he's got all his band are like playing trumpets, and that's because Louis Prima was a big trumpet playing guy. They based it off him. That was so popular. They did Robin Hood like the next year. That on the soundtrack there was this whole song called King Louis and Robin Hood. So King Louis is obviously not in the film Robin Hood, but there's this fictional song where they're best mates because they just wanted to put King Louis back in another song for Disney.
Really?
They put him in with King Louis and Robin Hood about how they're best mates.
I love it. Anyway, you did have trivia.
But
I tested you and you did.
The point of the Jungle Book one is that's probably one of the most nichest, like the least in need maybe of the warning message. They still have it. I just think there's a middle ground. It's all about intention, this stuff. What we're trying to do, we're trying to create a nanny state, we're trying to censor people and make a worse world, or are we trying to create a fairer world and give people opportunity? And sometimes those things do cross over, sometimes it goes too far. I think we'll have a correction soon, but ultimately I'm all right with a few messages appearing here or there, or I can live with an episode or two of it taken down if it does lead to a better society that's fairer for all.
If it does.
Yeah, if it does. Well, we've actually, as ever, got more Dad Diaries to go through, but we'll save them for another episode, Rory, because we've had a good little natter there, haven't we?
Good fun.
Thanks for watching, guys. Internet Dad's Pod on all socials. Follow, send us your Dad Diaries, send us voice notes if you want to be incorporated in the show like we did today, and leave us a like rating. It's much appreciated. See you on the next one.